Hey, I'm attorney Adam Tracy, coming to you today, fielding another question in the cryptocurrency space. Been getting a lot of inquiries about starting a cryptocurrency exchange and what goes into that, and what are the legal requirements to operate one, particularly in the United States. And primarily, the main licensure comes at the state level, right? And what that entails is obtaining some type of what's commonly known as a money transmitter or a money remitter license, right? And it's akin to a license that like a currency exchange would almost have with respect to the ability to transmit money, draw things like checks, cash checks, things like that, which may not apply to a cryptocurrency exchange, but in this case, it's really the best license and the only license you could arguably get that would fit the model, right? Because we're not talking about actual currency when you're talking about cryptocurrency. No, neither any state nor the federal government has denominated even Bitcoin to be an actual currency. But what you have is people putting in fiat currencies, like so American dollars, and then purchasing some other form of digital currency, which is not a currency per se. So for the most part, the licensure requirements involve getting this state level money remitter, money transmitter. It varies by state what the name of it is. Getting that license, which involves kind of a simple application fee, buying a bond, with like a fidelity bond, which is a form of insurance, and then going through the machinations of maintaining the license, background checks, and all that. At the federal level, there's a requirement that you license as what's called a money service business. And anybody involved in any sort of like financial services, short of being a bank, a federally licensed bank, has to register as a money service business, which is more of a less of a licensure application, but more of just a registration that your entity's been licensed with X state to provide X services, and you're subject to background checks and things of that nature. So it's relatively easy to put these together. The software is open source. It's actually pretty cost effective to buy it. So starting these things up from a cost perspective, from a sort of overhead and time perspective, isn't that difficult to do. The trick is staying compliant. And in light of the recent decisions by the SEC, one big thing comes to mind, which it was mentioned in that order, the Dow token order, but really hasn't been paid a lot of attention to, and that's the fact that if some of these cryptocurrencies, especially the tokens, are deemed to be securities, right? And we explained the difference between a coin and a token in a prior video, and it will give you some context if you go back and watch that. But if you're looking at what is deemed a token, and those, in many cases, at least to date, are undoubtedly securities, right? They've gone through the ICO and they, undoubtedly had some sort of offering that may have been an unregistered and therefore improper or illegal offering. But the implication for an exchange is that you now have, instead of digital currencies, which were, to some degree a commodity, to some degree nothing in the past, now all of a sudden your exchange, such as like Coinbase, for instance, you're exchanging securities. You're facilitating the trading of securities. Like, so if I go on and I have a particular token, I sell it, somebody else buys it, that exchange, right? And there's a lot of very good ones, and I'm clients, so I by no means speak ill of them, but the reality is that exchange has just facilitated the exchange of a security. It may have done so unwillingly because that token was listed and came to list on that exchange without the foregone knowledge that it was in fact a security, but now retroactively some of these tokens may in fact be securities, and they're trading every day on cryptocurrency exchanges, and the cryptocurrency exchanges are facilitating these trades. So under Section 6 of the Exchange Act, any entity that facilitates the exchange of securities subject to an exemption, which I'll touch on in a minute, must register with the Securities and Exchange Commission as a national securities exchange. So failure to register but still effectuate these transactions, which they may in fact still be doing. It's just so murky. What is a security? What isn't a security? And they're trading daily, right? Are they continually making violations of securities laws, but not unwittingly doing so? I don't know. I would think arguably yes, but I don't think it's a deliberate failure to register. So None of these exchanges on the domestic side are registered as a national securities exchange, and they'd unlikely come to be so because the requirements are so strenuous, not to mention the fact that any of the individuals involved would have to be registered and carry a number of licenses that come through FINRA. So it's an interesting issue, and it's a real serious concern for not only the current exchanges, but also people who want to start their own exchanges. And it will hinge upon what coins you ultimately want to allow to trade on your platform, right? And I would say, my advice would be to vet those coins with respect to the discussion of whether they are in fact securities, or if they're in fact, either commodities, which has some implication, but more importantly, neither commodities or securities, and that way you sort of stay out of the registration requirements. Now, there is an exemption with respect to the Section 6 of the Exchange Act, National Securities Exchange Registration Requirements, and that's to create what's called an ATS, an alternative trading system, which are very common, and those are quasi-private trading systems that are created amongst institutions for the purpose of trading. But a main requirement of an ATS is that the proprietor of the ATS has to be a licensed broker-dealer with FINRA. And so in that event, even with what you're looking at today in the infrastructure, you would need a licensed broker-dealer, which there are many, but at the same time, that broker-dealer would then have to try to convince the Securities and Exchange Commission that their exemption to create this private network would in fact be valid, and that private network wouldn't necessarily give access to individual traders like we have now with the myriad of exchanges that are out there. So it's a real concern. Now, the odd thing about it is that the exchanges that are offshore, which typically and rightfully so in some cases, get a lot of heat because of security issues, because they tend to disappear, because they're run by who knows, and there's a lot of issues with it. But the reality is those exchanges are actually not under the same regulatory and compliance issues as the domestic exchanges are, because an offshore exchange, right, whether it's a security or not, is not against U.S. law, because U.S. law would not apply. So if I'm a token issuer and arguably my token is a security, my thought is to get them on all the foreign exchanges right away and take them off the domestic exchanges to minimize my risk. And if I own an exchange, I'm going to delist those tokens that may be securities because I've got to protect myself. So it's an odd situation because it's almost creating a disincentive to some degree for legitimately well-ran domestic exchanges to not take business and push that business to otherwise perhaps less safe, less stable, less compliant exchanges that you would find in places like the Ukraine, of which there's ones that I think are very valid and very good. But if you look at it, a lot of the problems with respect to these exchanges collapsing have occurred with exchanges that are outside the jurisdiction of the United States. But the disincentive, knowing that if I'm a domestic exchange and one of my myriad, like a Bittrex that's got thousands of tokens listed, if one of those is deemed to be a security and I'm trading it, I could risk putting my entire business, my entire operation in jeopardy because of that one token. So there's no incentive for me to continue to trade it, especially when I can trade like a Bitcoin or something that's decidedly not a security without any issue, because there just simply isn't an issue. So it's something that you can consider. I get a ton of calls, with respect to people wanting to start exchanges. You definitely can. There's just a new wrinkle and element to it that you have to be wary of, and those who are unwary stand to get caught in the end when something retroactive, in terms of like a decision or something like that by the SEC comes back and sort of takes down not only an issuer of a token or a coin, but also the participants down the road, the people who are helping sell it, the people who are facilitating the trades on the exchange, and so on. So if you have the questions, you're looking to start an up exchange, I've got experience, love to help you out. Email me at@tracyfirm. Visit me bitcoin-lawyer.org. Until next time, talk to you.